Tonight, minority accuses governor of the central bank of acting illegally following BOG's decision to lend government 10 billion Ghana cedis to shore up the economy to address challenges with COVID-19.
The time of accountability will come soon. The time of accountability will come soon. Let nobody deceive you that you can do anything and get away with it. You may get away under your government today, but tomorrow you'll be accounted for. And I want to caution the central bank governor that he cannot act with impunity. He cannot decide to do things contrary to the law. The time for accountability will come.
We have details of proceedings in Parliament today as majority insists government needs no parliamentary approval.
I will stress that by the importance of the act, Parliament cannot decide that will not permit the minister to take the advantage from the Bank of Ghana. What is done is for the information of this House.
But tonight we ask, is government's borrowing from the central bank the best way to raise money for a post-pandemic economic revival?
The only way to go is to go to the central bank. Some people call it helicopter money, some people call it printing money. Whatever you do it, the central bank is there for such purpose, for an emergency.
We'll get the perspective of an economist. Top story is brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success are passion. Gasem, the nation builder. Vodafone, the future is exciting. Ready? I'm Ernest Manu. Now, the minority in Parliament is accusing the Bank of Ghana of acting illegally in the decision to lend government 10 billion Ghana cedis to shore up the economy to address challenges brought on by COVID-19. The MP say they will hold government to account if the NDC wins the 2020 elections. The finance minister has today requested approval from Parliament to borrow 10 billion cedis. Ken Ofeata told the House that already 5.5 billion of that money has been released.
The Minister of Finance, the Government of the Bank of Ghana, and the Controller and Accountant General, as required under Section 30 of the Bank of Ghana Act 202 Act 6.2, as amended, have agreed to trigger the emergency financing provisions under the law, which permits increasing the limit on the purchase of government securities by Bank of Ghana in the event of an emergency to help financial expenses. Mr. Speaker, government therefore decided to launch a special COVID-19 relief bond program with a size of Ghana cedis 10 billion. The coupon rate is set to the prevailing monetary policy rate of a 10-year tenor and 2-year moratorium on both principal and interest payments. I'm pleased to announce that the Bank of Ghana released the first tranche of the facility amounting to 5.5 billion to the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Speaker, as I stated earlier, the economic impact of COVID-19 could be as long as 3 years. To address this, the President has directed the Ministry of Finance to come up with a stabilization and a revitalization plan for the country. In this regard, the Ministry of Finance is developing a 3-year COVID-19 alleviation and revitalization of enterprise support program, the Ghana Care Program, to help stabilize and revitalize the country, the economy. We are confident that this program will lead us to the journey of achieving a Ghana beyond AIDS. Mr. Speaker, government remains unwavering in its commitment to protecting life and sustaining livelihoods and rebuilding our agricultural and industrial sector and positioning Ghana as a regional hub. Mr. Speaker, these are sobering times and a test of our own very humanity and how to be our brother's keeper. Mr. Speaker, even as government develops the Ghana Care Program, it is also time for burden sharing. Germany was able to stave off unemployment during the war by their system of caregivers. More people sharing full-time responsibilities of one worker. Whatever stimulus package will enable us to claw back our 5% of GDP that was lost, Mr. Speaker, we intend to do. It is a period of sacrifice, a period of burden sharing, and we have to avoid any spiritual stupor by ensuring that everyone is taken care of. In this vein, Mr. Speaker, we would like to lift on some of Gandhi's principles, a period of 3 years of politics with principle, wealth that comes from work, commerce that is through morality, pleasure that is conscionable, education of character, science that has a human face, and work that has sacrifice attached to it. Mr. Speaker, we are confident that we will come out of this much stronger and much greater. So we shall arise and shine, for the light has come. Even though there is darkness across the earth, and this darkness is for other people, but the Lord rises for us. So, Mr. Speaker, we remain more hopeful that our land will overflow with prosperity and we will leave no one behind as we build a greater society.
So that's the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta today in Parliament. But the minority spokesperson on finance, Kezola Tufosin, says the move is illegal, adding the decision by the bank to print more currency notes will endanger the economy. Listen.
You are copying blindly. This is Ghana. So please, let somebody tell the Minister of Finance that we resist this. Yeah. We will not allow this to go through. We will resist this.
From the majority say that they are not seeking approval, but rather information. They are just, the minister is just informing.
Look, it can be in a form of information. The law is clear. The law is clear. The law sets a ceiling, and the ceiling is 5%. And if I may read the law, Section 30 of Act 612 amended, it says that the principal enactment is amended by A, the substitution of subsection 2 of 2. The total loans, advances, purchases of treasury bills, and securities made under Section 1 shall not at any time exceed 5% of the total revenue of the previous year's revenue. So 5%. And as I said, we had 5% last year. The total revenue was 51.9 billion, approximately 52 billion. So 5% will give you about 2.5 billion. Today, they have already printed 5.5 billion, and they want to do 10 billion. 10 billion would translate approximately 19.2% of previous year's revenue. I don't know of any government that has done that.
But the minority is not chasing the shadows on the already.
Look.
We're talking about 10 billion, when 5.5 has already been printed.
The 5.5 billion in the first place was printed in a brand side. It's coming to inform us, and I'm sure by now he has already printed 10 billion. But let me tell you, the time of accountability will come soon. The time of accountability will come soon. Let nobody deceive you that you can do anything and get away with it. You may get away under your government today, but tomorrow you'll be accounted for.
So that's the minority spokesperson on finance, Kezola Tufosin. Let's break this down further. Parliamentary correspondent Joseph Opoku-Gatpo joins us on the line with more on this developing story. Joseph, let's start with details of this document that has been laid in Parliament today. What more does it say beyond the 10 billion which government is seeking from the Bank of Ghana?
So Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta explains that as a result of COVID-19 and related challenges, there is a gap in the economy to the tune of 21.42 billion Ghana cedis. Now, out of that amount of 21.42 billion Ghana cedis, 15.85 billion is as a result of revenue shortfall, and another 5.57 billion are COVID-19 related expenses. Now, the money to raise bits and pieces of that particular money in order to close that gap, including the $1 billion from the International Monetary Fund, which amounts to about 4 billion, which amounts to about 5 billion Ghana cedis. They've been able to raise money from the World Bank and also from the Stabilization Fund to the tune of more than $600 million, which is something in the region of 3 billion Ghana cedis. And so there remains a shortfall to the tune of 17.9 billion Ghana cedis. Now, in order to fill that gap of 17.9 billion Ghana cedis, they've gone for the said borrowing. They borrowed this amount from the Bank of Ghana to the tune of 10 billion Ghana cedis, which is money that they say it will take 10 years to repay, and that there is a 2-year moratorium, and that it's coming at an interest rate that's actually floating, and that all of that money is helping with the COVID-19 relief bond. And the finance minister disclosed that out of the 10 billion, as of the 15th of May 2020, an amount of 5.5 billion Ghana cedis has already hit the account of the Ministry of Finance, remaining the 4.5 billion. And so the document the Finance Minister laid on the floor of Parliament is to indicate to the House that in collaboration with the Governor of the Bank of Ghana, as well as the Controller and Accountant General, the Finance Ministry, under the Bank of Ghana Act Section 30, they've done the necessary amendments to trigger emergency financing provisions under the law, which will permit them to increase the limit of purchase when it comes to government securities. And so that's what has been laid in Parliament today. A number of issues have come up. The minority is insisting that this request is illegal. They are also making a claim that this is something that will require parliamentary approval, which they, the minority, will not support, although those on the majority side say it's just information that needs to come to the House. So that's what has been playing out today. The document itself has been referred to the Committee on Finance to consider and report back to the plenary subsequently.
Thank you very much. Joseph Opoku-Gato is our parliamentary correspondent. A lot of controversy brewing there. Let's go to the phone lines now and speak to the majority leader, Seche Mensah Bonsu. Thank you very much, sir, for your time here on Top Story. Let me start with the issue of procedure. Now, you argue that the finance minister does not need the approval of Parliament to do this, and that it is just for the information of the House. Why is that when this is a loan, which is the argument of the minority?
Well, the Bank of Ghana Act makes a distinction between advances made to government and loans. The language of Section 30 is very clear that the Bank of Ghana may make advances or loans to the government on overdraft or in any other form that the board may determine. That is Section 30. So there's a clear distinction between loans and advances. Indeed, when you go to 2, it also relates to the same thing. The total of the loans, advances, purchase of treasury bills and securities, together with monies borrowed by government from other banking institutions and so on and so forth. So a distinction is made. And now, today, the minister came, and he came on account of the Section 6 of the subsection 6 of Section 30, which provides that in of an emergency, the governor, the minister, the governor of the Bank of Ghana, the minister and the controller and accountant general shall meet to decide the limit of borrowing that should be made by the government, and the minister shall submit a report on the issue to Parliament within 7 sitting days. So, as I'm saying, there is a distinction made between loans, advances, and borrowings as far as the text of the Act is concerned. The minister then comes to Parliament, and he came to inform us about the limits. If you listen to if you look at the subsection 6 of Section 30, it says, in the event of the emergency, the minister and the controller and accountant general shall meet to decide the limit. So the report that the minister came with is that determination that they made about the limit of the borrowing, right? And he comes with a report to Parliament. And it is required of him to come to Parliament within 7 days after that decision has been made. Today is exactly the 7th day. So he came and is not in breach of any law. Now, this is a novel situation. It's a novel situation because whereas over expenditure has been made and monies have been taken from the Bank of Ghana without any report to Parliament, as happened in 2012, this time the minister is coming. And as I said, it's a novel situation. The minister comes to submit a report, which is what he did to Parliament today. Now,
Mr. Chairman, just a quick one on this. If what you're saying is anything to go by, what will the Finance Committee be doing then with a document presented to the House if he doesn't need the express permission of Parliament to go ahead with such a transaction?
What I said was that at this stage, the minister is presenting a paper to Parliament, that is a report to Parliament. And as our orders provide in Order 75, he comes and the orders provide that when he presents the paper, if he is minded to offer a short explanatory statement, he may do so upon the presentation of the paper. So he offered a short explanatory statement on that. What do we do with it as a Parliament? It is just like when the minister takes money from the contingency fund, which is provided for in Article 177 of the Constitution, that when the monies are taken, advances are made from the contingency fund, he only requires the authorization of the committee responsible for financial measures in Parliament, in this case, the Finance Committee. And if the Finance Committee is satisfied that there is an urgent need for this expenditure, they allow him to, make the advances from the contingency fund. Now, where the advance has been made from the contingency fund, then he comes with a supplementary budget as soon as possible to Parliament to tell us what he used the money for and what measures he's taking to replace that amount so advanced. So I was saying that because of this provision in Article 177, the minister should come with a report to inform us, and having done so, in the mid-year review, will come and offer further and better particulars, indeed explanations, and then Parliament will have to interrogate that matter at that time. That is what I said.
Mr. Chairman, I want you to hold the line for me. We're joined by a colleague on the other side, the Minority Leader, Haruna Idrisu. Thank you very much for your time here on Top Story. So the Majority Leader, who is also on the line with you, refers to Section 30, and it says that temporary advances, and the key word that he stresses on, advances. One says the bank may make advances and loans to government and overdraft or in any other form that the board may determine. B, make direct purchases from the government of treasury bills of security representing obligations of the government. The key word for him is that this is not just an ordinary loan where Parliament would have to give approval to government to go on with a transaction. And so your argument will not hold water.
Thank you very much. You may want to consult other legal and economic brains in the country for a neutral position on this matter. Very interesting arguments by the Majority Leader. Reintroduction of new nomenclature, advances, loans, borrowing. It means the same thing. The government of President Nana Addo Dankwa is engaged in borrowing, nothing more. The Minister of Finance paper itself read, report on the limit of borrowing, and quote, these are not my words, report on the limit of borrowing. Everywhere in the world, central banks can finance government up to a certain level and up to a certain amount. Post-IMF, what lessons have Ghana learned? 0 lessons. Because in IMF and post-IMF, there was 0% financing from the central bank. Even when under the NDC, they wanted to borrow up to 5%. The Bank of Ghana was in denial together with the IMF. Today, Minister Ken Oforiatta is borrowing 10 billion, and he must come under Article 181.
But that clearly was under an IMF program. We are no longer there. We are in a crisis situation.
I'm aware of crisis. Even under IMF, room was made for emergencies. You are dealing with an emergency. But our contention as a minority is that the government is borrowing and must necessarily come under Article 181, 2, and 3 of the Constitution. Nothing more. You just cannot present a paper to Parliament and expect to walk away with 10 billion cedis. We need to know, what are you going to do with 10 billion? You just took $1 billion US. You took $290 million US. You took $350 million US from the World Bank. Parliament is failing this country in providing for checks and balances and accountability by the Minister for Finance. I would not I would not accept any definition of borrowing in the words of Honorable Chairman at advances. What is
Mr.
advances?
You
Will the money be repaid or not? Go back to the Minister for Finance, paragraph 9. Paragraph 9. It says COVID board program, 10 billion Ghana cedis, and it says interest rate, floating pegged at monetary policy rate, currency cedis, repayment, amortizing after. Repayment will be amortizing after
2 years.
Moratorium, principal and interest period. So this is a loan. The Ghanaian taxpayer will be burdened. This government is escalating the domestic and public debt of the country, and we all must be concerned and worried.
Mr. Juicy, we'll be coming to the substance of that and what that has, the consequences of that for the economy. But your side is not willing to support this. The majority will push through with their numbers.
No, don't quote us wrong, please. We have nothing against supporting government to contain COVID, for the help of the economy and for the help of Ghanaians.
Kezel, I'm referring to Kezel Atufosin, who speaks for you on the Finance Committee. He says that your side of the House will not support this.
And I'm saying that we need better particulars. 10 billion for what? You just support 10 billion on paper because a report has been presented. What good will you have been doing?
So the minority is committed to this, except that you want some more clarification, some more detail.
Absolutely, some more detail and justification for it, and for them to come procedurally right. The fact that you quote Section 36, and I'm pleading with you, get the Bank of Ghana Act and read Section 31 and 2 in particular. Even where government has to borrow from the central bank, the requirement is that don't borrow beyond 10% of the previous year revenue. Where are we? 10 billion is far more than 10% of our.
And Mr. Juicy, it is very clear that the procedural issues are not just the concerns of the minority, but in terms of how much you're borrowing and its effect on the economy. Let me go to Mr. Chairman Sabons, who is on the other line. You have received, government has taken 1 billion from the IMF. The World Bank made available 35 million out of 100 million cedis that was pledged to us. We had 600 million cedis also as stimulus packages to industries, small-scale industries. Why do we need this money again?
The minister explained that the shortfall in revenue, and especially from petroleum revenue, from imports, from shortfalls in other matters, indeed even services being rendered in the country. And he related to the shortfall. As of now, the computation census is reaching of over, in fact, we even approaching about 30 billion. And so he says to us that where we are, we need to be supportive in order to close the gap. That is why he came with this. I'm happy to hear that now the minority leader is no longer talking about procedural matters, because that was the initial thing that we were talking about. As for accountability, all of us stand to demand that there should be greater accountability of the amounts that government, the minister, is borrowing. And indeed, he must come to us clearly with a roadmap to replenishing the stock from the Bank of Ghana.
I would like to find out, are we saying that we may not have to borrow any more beyond this 10 billion we're getting from the Bank of Ghana? Because the concern really is that we've done so much within a short time. And yes, we know that the pandemic has an effect on the economy, but we should hasten slowly. And for instance, with the monies that are yet to be disbursed to the small-scale industries, we should see how this would roll out and have an effect on the economy. Then we can begin to add on. That is the concern.
I agree that there are matters that must be interrogated. We are talking about the process of implementation. Are we adding them on the level of the gap that has maybe that we anticipate to happen in the economy? Are we adding them on that? Do we disagree on that? If we don't disagree, because nobody is raising any issue, they are not raising issues about that. And if we don't disagree, how are we as a nation to bridge that funding gap? the minister is making a suggestion that we've taken some amount from these places. Now the gap is still there. There is a huge gap. And I think that we can go to Bank of Ghana, look inside to take this amount from the Bank of Ghana. If we agree, now then that is the next step. Colleagues are saying that, it should be considered as a loan. And because it's a loan, in their opinion, it should come to Parliament, and Parliament must authorize government to spend. That is the other leg that I disagreed, that no, this cannot be considered as a loan, which must be subject to Parliament's approval. And that is why I drew the attention to Article 177. This really is an emergency situation. First of all, they started by saying that the minister cannot even take it. And
you eloquently made the point there, Mr. Chairman Sabon. So I want you to hold on briefly for me. Haruna Idrisu, you're still on the line with us, I guess. Now, we are in extraordinary times. In fact, the finance minister says that this is a time for sacrifice and burden sharing. Yes, we are going to lose about 5% of our GDP. The debt stock will certainly go up. But really, do we have a choice in this matter?
Yes, so in sacrificing, the first thing the Minister of Finance must do is expenditure reprioritization and rationalization to cut down on profligate expenditure. We have not seen any indication of that. Now, two, it's important that you read Section 30 of Act 612. The total loans, advances, purchase of treasury bills and securities under subsection 1 shall not at any time exceed 5% of the total revenue of the previous fiscal year. You don't expect the minority to support an illegality. Therefore, we are going to compare the amount he is seeking to borrow from the Bank of Ghana from his previous year revenue. If it exceeds 5 to 10% as is required of law, we will not support that unlawful act.
Thank you very much. Haruna Idrisu is the minority leader. We also had earlier the majority leader, Osache Mensah. So really the question now is the propriety of government's borrowing from the central bank. And we'll be speaking to an economist to find out if really that is the best option in raising funds for a post-pandemic economic revival activity. And the finance minister calls this a Care Ghana project, which is a revival program as far as the economy is concerned. We'll be speaking to economists with the Institute of Statistical and Economic Research, Dr. Aka, for his perspective on this issue. What is the best way forward? We've had funds already from the IMF. We've also heard from the World Bank. They have brought us some 35 million out of a 100 million that was made available to the country. We've also had 600 million stimulus package, taking some money from the contingency fund. Do we have options other than going to the central bank? And then there's the question of the consequence of borrowing from the bank, which has an effect on the economy by way of inflation, as against the consequence of borrowing, and also the effect you have to deal with the exchange rate and paying back your loans, which is more prudent. We'll be hearing from economists with Isa. He spoke to Daniel Dazi earlier. I want us to listen to him shortly.
We need government to come out to find the money to spend. One may ask, where is government going to get the money from? I was discussing with some ministers before, and they said, where is the money? And if we print money, are we not going to spare inflation? I said, no. No. And that's why I'm happy that the central bank has to step in with a 10 billion Ghana cedi support. That's about $2 billion US. It's better for us to find the money from the central bank than to go to IMF to borrow, and then we have conditionalities that also will worsen the recession. We need to sit down and look at the economic theories that we have been following for all these years and question them, whether they are sustainable and they are sensible, given the situation where we find ourselves.
We did see, and it was hailed when it was announced that this time, especially the 1 billion fund, it did not come with conditionalities. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yes, this time is because it's an emergency one, does not come with conditionalities. But still you are still indebted. It's still not the best because it's still foreign denominated. So which means that we need to repay. It's not free. And we need to look for dollars to repay. After the crisis, we'll be faced with a debt situation. And then our debt to GDP will go up. And then we need to look for cedis to turn them into dollars and pay to have impact on our currency. going forward. So if we can mobilize that from within, is best. Now, but because we are in crisis, you can't mobilize it from the private sector. So the only way to go is to go to the central bank. Some people call it helicopter money. Some people call it printing money. Whatever you do it, the central bank is there for such purpose, for an emergency.
And that's Dr. Charles Aka with the Institute of Economic Research, Statistical and Economic Research, ISE. That's it for Top Story, brought to you by Bond, Savings and Loans. Your success, our passion. GASM, the nation builder. Vodafone, the future.